Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. It's Jen with Mike's Camera. I have Mark Cruz here with us. He's going to talk about the new Nikon Z F.
I got it in my hands right here. It's been an exciting week since we announced it, and what I can tell you is that this is now a full frame, sort of a classic designed inspired camera. It has all the physical dials, very similar to the ZFC, but now in a full frame 24 megapixel camera that introduces a lot of new technology.
It does look very nice. I love the design. So who is this camera built for?
You know, it's interesting. I think first and foremost, I think this camera is built for a lot of the people that appreciate design and appreciate the retro look, I'll just use that word, of their cameras, of the film cameras of old. I mean, is a demographic that would actually make an argument to use this for video, given how highly spec'd it is for the $2,000 price point. But first and foremost, for people that appreciate, I think, deliberate nature of photography, creating the images and everything that goes into it, it's really kind of designed to slow you down somewhat in your process of seeking pictures. I mean, don't get me wrong, it can take very fast, rapid shots. This can even go up to 30 frames per second now, the first time for a camera of this caliber. But, you know, just the deliberate nature of the dials, the tactile feel of everything, and then how you engage with the camera is a little bit of a throwback, but I think it's a throwback that a lot of people appreciate in this day and age. A lot of people are now shooting with film, and I think this represents a perfect hybrid, a blend, an intersection of design, high specifications, and just the journey of creating imagery for a lot of creators out there will appeal to them. Whether you're young, old, or anywhere in between, the type of person that just enjoys the process of creating images, this camera, I think, is for them.
The design is awesome. It definitely reminds me of a film camera, so I think people are really going to like that. Would you consider it to be kind of a midway point between the Z6 and the Z9? Like, where would you put it on that scale?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. The body itself alone is right at the $2,000 price point. So at this point in time, 2023, almost the end of, it's a few $100s more than a Z6 II. So it's more comparable to the Z6 II in terms of price. The Z8 is really a $4,000 body, so it's not really comparable to that. It shares the same processor as a Z8, so it can inherit a lot of the new features that the Z6 II doesn't have. So the X-Speed 7 processor that is in the Z8 is in the ZF now. So that's the Z8 and the Z9, the same processor is in this camera. However, the sensor is very similar to the Z6 II. It's a 24 megapixel sensor, not a 45. And it's also not a stacked CMOS sensor like the Z8 and Z9, which gives them advantages in, the rolling shutter and the autofocus. But the processor here has really elevated it. So it's really a part of a third generation of cameras that are designed around the X-Speed 7 platform. In price, it's closer to a Z6 II. Sensor-wise and resolution-wise, closer to a Z6 II and the ISO performance, but a lot of things have been inherited from this flagship, and then as well as the Z8 now, the Z8 and the Z9. So, but price point closer to a Z6 II.
So what type of content will be good for this camera? What will it be great for?
Yeah, let me address that. So like I said at the beginning, it's great for people that are doing more deliberate style photography. You know, it could be street photography. There's a vast amount of things here that you could use this for. But let me tell you, it can appeal to portrait photographers because it has new features here inherited from the Z8 and Z9s, the portrait impression balance. It has things in here that are dedicated for black and white photography. So we actually have a black and white switch right on the mode dial with new picture controls specifically for this camera. In addition to that, people that want to even if they wanted to take selfies and self-portraits and things like that, vlogging, it has a front-facing screen. So those type of content creators, ideal for them. But let me also tell you, it's not beyond the imagination that you could use this for sports. I know the ergonomics is not what you would think as a sports camera, but this can now shoot up to 14 frames per second for the mechanical shutter. So this still has a mechanical shutter. It's not a stacked sensor, but it can also shoot up to 30 frames per second with full autofocus in high resolution JPEG. So you'll get 24 megapixel JPEGs up to 30 frames per second with the full frame, full resolution, which means that if you're shooting things like sports or wildlife and you need those high frame rates, The ZF can accomplish that, whereas, say, a Z6 II maxes out at around the 14 frames per second for the mechanical shutter. So the 30 frames per second, and this is really using what's called an electronic shutter. So it's a great hybrid. It's borrowed some features from the Z8 and implemented it into here. So last thing I will tell you is that people that even shoot commercial photography can get probably the highest resolution of any of the cameras in Nikon's entire fleet of Z cameras, because this introduces something called pixel shift technology. So what that does, it's new in our lineup, not necessarily new to the industry, but this can take several images, 4, 8, 16, and up to 32 images in quick succession, that where the sensor itself is actually shifting a pixel at a time. And with our free software, NX Studio, you can merge those to create a higher resolution image, up to 96 megapixels. So what that means is that this camera that's natively 24 in my hand, when you merge all those pictures that it takes in quick succession, you can get up to a 96 megapixel file, which is great for commercial photography. But in addition to that, it's not just creating a 96 megapixel file, it's creating a file that has the lowest noise, the lowest moire, and the best color reproduction possible when you actually do the exercise of merging those all together. It cleans up the noise and will, at 96 megapixel, give you a file that's even cleaner than a 24 megapixel file. It's incredible. Mind you, you should put it on a tripod when you do that, because you don't want things in the picture to move. So it's not beyond the pale that someone that shoots commercial or just like reproduction of things, paintings and things like that, would choose a ZF.
So would you consider this camera to be better for photography or videography, or is it equal for both?
You know what, that's a great question. I was just talking with my colleague about this at lunch. I think naturally people are going to look at this for photo primarily, but I'll give you a scenario here. At the price range this is at the $2,000 price range, it is very competitive, and if not exceeds in many instances what the Z6 II and Z7 II can do for video. So in that price range, if I was looking for a camera at that price range, I couldn't look past the ZF, because this can now do internal 10-bit N-Log. In a Z6 II, we would need an external device through HDMI just to get 10-bit N-Log. You can do that right now internally to the SD card. Plus, you can record for up to 2 hours and 5 minutes, provided you have enough card space right in the camera. The Z6 II, Z7 II still had the 30-minute threshold for recording clips. In addition to that, there are several other video enhancements in here in terms of the autofocus and in terms of all the other aids that are applied to the video that are built into the ZF. But the main thing is that 10-bit N-Log, high 2-hour recording, and the front-facing screen. A lot of video content creators demand the screen, which is really why we implemented it on these cameras. And if this is a deal breaker for you, then I think this is probably the better bet in terms of video. Despite the way it looks like a film camera, I think from our lineup at present, for this price range, it's actually probably the best in terms of video.
So how was the image stabilization on the camera?
Yeah, the image stabilization on this is a thing to talk about, because it actually meets a new threshold in terms of stops. So with certain lenses at certain focal lengths, namely the 24 to 120, we've tested it at 120, and it can achieve now up to 8 stops of stabilization. Most of our Z series cameras started out with 5 stops at 5 axis. Some of them, using some lenses, can do synchro VR. That's really with the Z8 and Z9. Some certain telephoto lenses can achieve up to 5.5 or 6 stops. This now benchmarks at 8 stops of VR. So very, very stable. But here's the thing. We have a new feature in the ZF called Focus Point VR. And the way that works is the image stabilization in body, the IBIS, is usually designed to stabilize the center of the frame. And in doing so, you know, the edges might not be as sharp as the center. However, now we can customize the camera to focus the stabilization on the part of the frame where the focus point is. It could potentially have tremendous effect when you want to put your focus point at the extreme edges of the frame. So I think a lot of people, what I've seen on the online forums, are talking about that focus point feature because it's the first camera, I think, in the entire world to implement that. It's the world's first to have focus point VR.
What else is different about this camera that you can tell us?
Well, there's a few things with the camera. The first time that we've been able to implement on a Z camera touch functions. So if you look at the back of the camera here, to make it small and compact, we've removed a lot of the physical interface, such as the joystick button that we used to have with the bigger cameras like a Z8, Z9, even Z6 II, to make it nice, small, and compact and mirror, the FM models of years past. But what we've resurrected is using the touch screen to be effectively your joystick. So you can actually drag your thumb around the screen while you have your face pressed up against the electronic viewfinder, and use the screen as your joystick and just figure out your focus points just by dragging your thumb around. You can also customize the other side. You can customize a half or a quadrant or the full screen to do your activation of Touch FN, which is not just focus points, but other things as well that you can assign to that. So that's really special about this camera. In addition to that, there is dual card slots, I will mention with this, in that you can use SD and micro SD if you want to back up. A lot of people will be happy that despite the smaller size, we're still using the ENEL 15 C battery, which is the same as the Z8, Z6 II, Z7 II, even a lot of our DSLRs. So if you have those batteries, even the B model and even the A and the one before that, you can still use it in the ZF. I will mention as well that we do have a more flat style of body here. And with this, we've introduced a little bit more of a nub, I would say, in the grip area over the ZFC, which is completely flat. However, we've teamed up with Small Rig, a company that designs a lot of rigs, as their name would imply, but they created a grip for this as well, specialized for this, that will give you a larger, deeper grip, as well as quick access to the battery and memory card door compartments, but as well as an Arca Swiss plate at the bottom, so you can attach to common tripod heads.
And I know that we're offering it body only, and it comes with 2 different lenses as well, right?
That's correct. So you have the option of getting it body only, about $2,000. Now, the great thing is the hero lens that's going to be coming with it. The first kit option that we have, and a lot of people have latched onto since the announcement of it, is the 40mm Special Edition F2 lens. Now, this lens was introduced a couple of years back. We have 2 versions of it, a contemporary version and a retro style with the knurling that matches these retro cameras from a previous era. But the great thing about it is the value when kitted with this body. It's only about $229, I think, when you get it with it. So tremendous value for a 40mm F2, and you get every bit of that 40mm because it's full frame. And then lastly, we have an option for the 24-70 f4S line zoom lens, consistent f4 aperture with this, and I believe you're saving about $400 when you get it combined with the ZF for about $25.99. So that's really exciting. You have a couple of options there.
It's very exciting. Thank you so much for showing us the new ZF today.
My pleasure. It's really exciting.